Hello, children and grandchildren. Many of you have written back asking Grandpa Poe about what his background is. And many of you have described what your background is. I may have been in your country, or maybe even in your town. Wouldn't that be interesting? Our first location is in the United States, in the state of Pennsylvania, and in a little town in western Pennsylvania called Newcastle. That's where Grandpa grew up. Is it possible that maybe one of you lived in the United States, maybe even in Pennsylvania, and maybe even in western Pennsylvania in a town called Newcastle? We're going to discover that possibility, that we may have a connection that we didn't even realize. I want to show you something. This is my father. I know many of you watch because you don't have a father or a grandfather, and I understand that. This is a picture very dear to me because I love my father very much. But my father also died when I was only 12 years old. But this is a picture of me when I was only 6 years old with my father. Now, it was taken at a circus where they took pictures of people in western Pennsylvania, in the United States, and just outside of a town called Newcastle. Here's the funny thing about this. In this picture, my father has a funny hat on. The funny hat looks like a hat that Peter Pan would wear, which exactly, it is exactly that. And I had one too, and when we had our picture taken, my hat fell off, but my dad's hat stayed on. Isn't that funny? And so he has a Peter Pan hat on, and I don't have one on. We had a good time at the circus that day. Now I'm going to show you something else. This is an interesting thing. This was my father's. You don't see these anymore. You don't see things like this anymore because they're not necessary. Look, it's a little container with a little lid on it. This is what people used a long time ago, and they contained matches called stick matches, and they would carry these around, and if they had to start a little fire, or they had to start a candle or something like that, they had a ready means to start a fire. And this is made from actually silver, called German silver. This was my father's. He carried it for many years with matches in it. All right. Now, I'd like to show you another interesting thing that people don't use at all today. This was my mother's. This is a picture of my mother when she was a young girl. Her name was Helen. Now, look at this. Isn't it pretty? Here's another one. And look at this. It has a hook on the end. What do you suppose? What do you suppose these two things were for? A long time ago, people had shoes that had a strap on them and a button. They didn't have laces. They had a strap with a button on it. And what they would do, instead of lacing up a shoe like you might do today, they would reach across and grab hold of the loop and pull it across and pull it over top of the button. And that's how they laced up their shoe. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And if you look back in your history, it might be that one of your grandparents, they might have used such a thing. Now, after Grandpa Poe was done going to school and he got educated, he decided that he had something that he really liked to do. He was a medic in the Army, and so he could have been maybe a doctor, but Grandpa Poe liked airplanes. Do you like airplanes? And do you remember when Grandpa Poe was a little boy and he showed you a picture when he was a little boy and he was only 8 years old and he had an Air Force uniform on? Well, Grandpa Poe ended up going to work for an airline that flew many, many airplanes. First airline that Grandpa Poe worked for was this airline. Look at this airplane. And do you see the duck on the tail? The duck is the logo for this airline, and it was called North Central Airline. It flew in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Illinois, all the way east to Pennsylvania and west to Colorado. And this particular airplane was a DC-3. This airplane would have flown to all those states. Do you live in any of those states? And this particular airplane was unique. This had more hours on this airplane, the real airplane, than any other airplane in the world. Do you live in Michigan, in the United States? At the Ford Museum, this very airplane, of which this is a model, is on display at the Ford Museum. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? My children and grandchildren. I I hope that I got the chance to mention maybe your country today, or maybe the state that you live in. I tried. I hope I mentioned your country, and I hope that makes us feel more connected than than we have in the past. But if I failed to mention your country, or maybe the state that you live in, or even the town that you live in, don't feel bad, because Grandpa Poe is going to do more of these, and that will make us feel more connected, which I hope you will like to do that. I love you very much, and I'm glad I was able to spend this time together with you.